So I thought it might be fun to do something a little bit different in this video and talk about something that's not tarot related, because I've done a lot of tarot related content lately. One of the things that I notice within sort of pagan communities particularly is that witches on TV, witches in popular culture, quite often have a bad rep, particularly if they are evil or they play up to some kind of stereotype or their magic's really flashy and showy. They can get quite poorly looked on by pagans and witches within the community. And while I kind of get it, personally, I love a good witch. And when I say good witch, I don't mean good as in nice. I mean like a good stereotypical, evil to the bone, camp, over the top, ridiculous stereotype of witch. I love it. So I'm going to share with you my top 10 witches in pop culture right now. And when I say right now, I don't think any of these are particularly modern. And it does kind of show my age a little bit. But these are the top 10 witches that I currently love and have a lot of time for. I will point out that they are all women. That isn't to say that I don't think men can be witches. I absolutely do. And I'm sure there are some amazing male witches in popular culture, but these just happen to be the ones that I like, and they just happen to all be women. It's not a deliberate choice, it's just the way that it worked out. Anyway, without any more waffle, coming in at number 10, we have the Grand High Witch from Roald Dahl's The Witches. I was the biggest fan of Roald Dahl as a child. I'm sure many children were. I know many of the children of my generation were. And The Witches was my favourite. I think Matilda was possibly one of the most popular amongst people, but The Witches happened to be my personal favourite. I loved the book, and then when the film came out in the 90s with Angelica Houston, it just took it to another level for me. I was terrified of the Grand High Witch, but I also kind of was a little bit fascinated by her. I thought Angelina Houston played her to perfection, and you know, at 7 or 8 she was scary. As a child she was scary, but she was like proper fairy tale, stereotypical, evil, ugly witch, and I loved it. And I have to say, as a 30-something childless by choice woman, I can kind of empathise with them now. You know, their plot was to rid England of all children, and there are moments when I think, yeah, I could get behind that. I can see where you're coming from. But yeah, I loved Roald Dahl, I loved The Witches, and I particularly loved Angelica Houston as the Grand High Witch. It was like the first witch that I remember loving as much as I did. Coming in at number 9, we have Molly Weasley from Harry Potter. Now, I've said before on other videos, I'm not the biggest Harry Potter fan in the world. I've seen all the films at least once, maybe some of the early ones I've seen a couple of times. I know that I've read all of the books once, and I'm currently in the process of rereading them on audiobook at the moment. So I'm not the hugest Potter fan in the world, but I do love the universe, and I love the witches and the wizards in that universe, and I love the story that she's created. And there are actually a few that I could have chosen to be number 9 on my list. But the reason that I went with Molly Weasley is because I love the fact that she's this mother. She's like the total mother archetype. Everything is about her family and her children, and you know, the Weasleys are I think just the best family in the whole series. Arthur and Molly Weasley are probably 2 of my favourite characters anyway, but she's very motherly, she's very maternal, she's very much about protecting and caring for her children and her family, but she's also a kick-ass, badass witch in her own right. She takes on one of the scariest protagonists in the film, in the books, by herself. She is not by any means weak or in need of defending. She's bloody powerful, and also soft and motherly and kind and compassionate, and I love that. I absolutely love that, you know, showing that she can be both of those things at the same time. Both of those things can coexist. I think that's beautiful. Coming in at number 8, we have Bonnie Bennett from The Vampire Diaries. I loved The Vampire Diaries, the original series. I haven't watched any, admittedly, since maybe the end of season 6, season 7, whenever it was that Elena left, the character left. There probably will be spoilers in this video. I probably should have pointed that out at the beginning. There haven't been any as yet, but as we go along there may be more, so just bear that in mind. But I always thought that Bonnie, for me, was the main female character in The Vampire Diaries. Her journey was so interesting, from how she went to this teenage girl who joked that she was a bit psychic to this proper, powerful witch. In my opinion, she ended up being the most powerful character, recurring main character in the whole series. She was much more interesting to watch. Her growth was much more interesting to watch. Her relationships were wonderful. Her relationships with people were fantastic. Her relationship with Damon and how that grew over time was just amazing. And she was so powerful, but she was also compassionate, and she was selfless almost to a fault. Like, Bonnie was the one who would step up time and time and time again and be willing to sacrifice herself or something important to her in order to save the world or save her friends or whatever it was that needed doing. She was just incredible. She was definitely my favourite. I don't know how her story ended. I don't know how any of their stories ended because I stopped watching it. But from what I saw of everybody in the series, Bonnie Bennett was my favourite and definitely one of my all-time favourite witches. Coming in at number 7 is Katrina Crane from the Sleepy Hollow TV series. She, again, kick-ass, powerful witch. This is a witch who survived purgatory, who managed to keep her husband alive for hundreds of years, who had some pretty badass powers, was completely independent. She was in a relationship, she loved her husband, their relationship was very supportive and kind and wonderful, but she was a character in her own right, she was a witch in her own right, she was far more powerful than he ever was or would be. And she's one of the characters that started out as a protagonist and became an antagonist by the end of her story arc, but the progression from one to the other was tragic, and it was so believable, and it was so heart-rendering, and it was just this sad but wonderful journey to go on through those first couple of series. And as she got more powerful, her magic got darker. As she got more into this storyline, this tragic storyline, her magic got more powerful, which was, very, very well done. Season 1 and 2 of Sleepy Hollow were definitely my favourite seasons, and that has a lot to do with Katrina Crane. She was a fantastic character and a fantastic witch, and yeah, definitely makes it into my top 10. At number 6, we have Lamia from Stardust. There is nothing likeable or redeemable about this character. This is the character that is probably almost, a bit like the Grand High Witch actually, is the epitome of old-fashioned fairy tale witch. She is evil to the core, she is vain, she is power hungry, she's greedy, she's wrathful, she's got all these sins built into her personality and her character. There is nothing redeemable about her, but she is so much fun to watch. I mean, you watch her and Michelle Pfeiffer is clearly having a ball playing this character, and because of that, I'm having a ball watching this character. She's fun, she's funny, she's, there's a lot of black humour in there. She's powerful, she's very, very powerful, and is definitely a witch with magical abilities who knows her stuff, but she's just bad to the bone, and I freaking love it. So we've now made it into the top 5 of my favourite pop culture witches of all time, and coming in at number 5 is Sarah Bailey from The Craft. I am from that generation where The Craft was the thing. You know, the 90s was very big on the witch thing. The Craft was really fundamental in that. And it was fundamental for me in my path and my journey and how I ended up where I am today. And I loved all four of the girls, but Sarah Bailey was the one that I liked the most. She was the one that I would probably want to be friends with. She was a natural witch. She was powerful and had her own powers before she ever met up with the other four. She was an all-round nice girl. She was kind. She just, you know, she just wanted to belong and she just wanted to fit in, but she was also the one who recognised when things had gone too far and was willing to pull back and maybe stop what they were doing. If I could be any of the women, any of the girls in the Craft, I would want to be Sarah. I think that she was definitely the most powerful of the four overall, but also the most compassionate of them all. At number 4, I've kind of cheated because I've put the Sanderson sisters. And yes, I know, that's actually 3 people, not 1. But I don't think you can have one without the other. I think the reason that the Sanderson sisters are so much fun and work so well is because of the combination of all 3 personalities. And if you don't know, these are from the film Hocus Pocus. If you haven't seen it, where have you been? And get out there and watch it because it's freaking amazing. I've seen this film hundreds of times, and the reason it's so much fun to watch and the reason it's so good is because of the Sanderson sisters. They are funny, they are evil, they are vain, they are selfish, they are, you know, they're just, again, that kind of stereotypical evil, want to kill the children type witches, and they're just so much fun, so much fun. And their magic is fun. They're, you know, when they curse the town through song, that just really speaks to my soul. It's great. They are great. They're a wonderful combination of characters, and yeah, I think you've got to see it. If you haven't, you've got to see it, but they're just amazing, absolutely amazing. At number 3, we have another character from The Craft, and this time it's Nancy Downs. So although Sarah is the one that I like the most and the one that I would want to be or want to be friends with, and it ends up being the most powerful, Nancy Downs is by far the most interesting of the 4. She is tragic. She's actually very tragic. I really, as a grown-up, I see her story in a very different way than I did when I watched it as a teenager. And I think that she's very, very tragic. She is somebody who comes from a very tough background, who has no power because of her background, her upbringing, and, you know, her position in society and things. She has no power of her own. And she discovers this thing that gives her ultimate power, and it goes to her head. It goes to her head and she loses control. And I think that's, you know, understandable, and it's believable, and it's done very, very well. And ultimately, I think the thing with Nancy is that she is, despite her faults, she is a character who cares very, very deeply about her coven, her friends. They matter more to her than anything else. And everything that she does at the end of the film is a reaction to feeling betrayed and abandoned by Sarah. And it's very much a study of how, when somebody has no power, goes from having no power of their own to, and this really awful background, to suddenly having all of this power, but still being unable to control other people, and still being hurt or abandoned, or still, you know, finding yourself knee deep in those things that you're most afraid of. It's very much a study of how those two things can come together to form this explosion that kind of obliterates everything around it. I probably loved it for very different reasons when I was a teenager, but I do very much enjoy kind of the analytical study of human behaviour type thing in The Craft. And I just love Nancy. She's just so much fun. Like, the girl's batshit. I love her. So we're now down to my top 2, and for my second position, I've cheated again because I've picked Sally and Gillian Owens from Practical Magic. Now, again, Practical Magic was a formative film for me. It came out in 98 when I was 16, and I was just kind of getting interested in witchcraft. It was before I'd really gone from witchcraft to paganism, but it was when I was first getting into witchcraft and magic and that idea that we could create our own realities and all that kind of stuff. And Practical Magic came along, and again it was this wonderful story about, over and above everything else, about this relationship between these two sisters. And I think the reason the film works for me so well is because of their relationship. And I think the characters, neither character would particularly work well in a film on their own. I think the fact it's their almost complete opposites that make them feel like one whole person. I don't know if that makes any sense. When I was younger, I very much wanted to be like Gillian. As I get older, I very much feel more connected to Sally Owens, I have to admit. And one of the things I really loved about Practical Magic is that although there was things like, you know, they flew off the roof, and they brought somebody back from the dead, and, you know, she managed to make the rose petals fly in the air and that kind of stuff. The underlying foundation of a lot of the magic that they do in that film is very, very similar to the type of magic that I would do, or that we as witches might partake in. You know, when you take away the supernatural elements of it, there's a lot in there that's recognisable and very similar to the types of things that we might do. And I really loved that, and it really kind of gave me a direction when I was younger. And as I say, for a long time I wanted to be Gillian Owens. Now I feel much more connected to Sally Owens as I get older, although I still don't want to be a mum. But I think you cannot have one without the other. I genuinely couldn't pick one without the other, because I love them both for very, very different reasons. So we've made it all the way to the end of my top 10, and my number one witch of all time would be Willow Rosenberg from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I am from the Buffy generation. I was exactly the right age when Buffy the Vampire Slayer came out. I was its target audience. I loved it. It had a huge impact on me again. It's probably my number one favourite series of all time. If I ever went on Mastermind, it would be my specialist subject. It's the DVD box set that I dig out most often. And sitting down with a couple of episodes of Buffy is very much part of my self-care routine. Willow Rosenberg was always, without a doubt, my favourite character. Right from episode 1, she was absolutely my favourite character. When she got into witchcraft, at this point I was like knee deep in paganism and, you know, studying paganism and practicing and learning magic and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, it was just amazing, and I loved it, and it was so exciting for me. She's like, I love her. It's very difficult for me to explain why, actually, and put it into words, but I just love her. I loved her story arc. I loved her relationships. I loved her relationship with Oz. Her relationship with Tara is probably one of my favourite TV relationships ever. Just ever. It was wonderful. I wanted to be them. I loved the way that they kind of took her on this journey with magic, and again they showed how it could become addictive and it could become dangerous if it wasn't handled properly, or if it was, you know. And then there was that wonderful storyline where her magic became her way of dealing with her grief, and how dark that became, and how twisted she became, and how her magic was very much tied up into her emotional state. And again, it was very showy, very TV magic, but it had a lot of underlying truth in there, particularly about like I say, that relationship between her emotional state and what was going on in her life, and how that affected her magic, and how her magic came out in those ways. She is and will forever be, I believe, my favourite witch of all time. I've yet to find a witch in pop culture that would beat her. But if you have very different answers to me, do let me know in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more witchy content, because I am going to try and get back into some more witchy content, do give me a thumbs up and let me know. And if you haven't subscribed and you are interested in seeing more witchy content, do that, because there definitely is more coming. Until next time, thanks very much for sticking with me, everyone, and I will see you all soon. Lots of love. Bye bye.